I don't claim to make truly 100% original content. I never have. Having to come up with constantly fun, interesting, and original ideas, especially if you're trying to grow and make videos on a daily basis, can be incredibly exhausting, and I respect creators who have. However, this isn't to say that certain creators have reached the heights that they have on their own. Many creators, including myself, employ the yoink and twist, the reimagining of certain concepts that already exist, and try to translate them to our own audiences, humor, comedy, etc. Some people have writing and creative staff in order to help them with this overall process. Some people spend hours online looking at trends to see what works and what doesn't. And then I saw this video, a video by one of my most favorite content creators, Tom Scott, which talked about OpenAI's GPT-3, or Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. Please be sure to check out the video in the description down below. It served very heavily to inspire this one. So, in short, GPT-3 is an AI that uses deep machine learning in order to generate human-like text. Now, what a computer and a person define as human-like are two very different topics, but in short, if you feed it a prompt, it will try and emulate it, and it will respond to it as best as it can. And that's what I spent my 4 a.m. doing, feeding prompts into GPT-3 to come up with my own personal solution to creating truly original Yu-Gi-Oh content, at least in the eyes of a robot, that is. So, can we do it? Can we train an AI to help me, Content Leech Supreme, generate original Yu-Gi-Oh ideas, at least for content? And the answer, unsurprisingly, is yes. Who would have guessed that an AI with millions of dollars behind it and 175 billion parameters could have helped a man-child generate ideas for a children's card game and video topics? Now, the AI overall isn't bad. It does the best of what it is given, and overall it did as reasonable a job as anyone. However, there were a lot of questionable suggestions. I was getting titles like, I played a $4,000 game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which in reality is kind of just money matching. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie literally already exists. There are a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Movies, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Myths Busted. These are all either things, concepts, or videos that already exist in some capacity. This isn't great for making original content, but it's a great start. The skeleton is there. There's a setting called temperature, and it's a slider that controls the AI's randomness. Too low and it would just be giving you video ideas that are either borderline or directly identical to the prompts you gave it over and over again. Like, it will just repeat itself tons of times. And too high gave you results such as, I sat on the score sheet at a YCS. I think that'll just get you banned. And how to stop a chaining vessel of Immateria Drake. I think it might have seen a Tenyi guide in its research. However, if we adjust the parameters properly and we sort of get that little perfect sweet spot, that's when we can really begin to strike gold. I made this deck and it's actually good. If we give it a clickbaity enough thumbnail, then yeah, I could see myself doing this for, say, like a Wind Witch Burn deck profile. I'm changing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta with a single card. People already do this with side deck top 10s. I can very easily translate this into maybe a 3-minute video about why I'm siding Necro Valley or something very similar. I bought every Yu-Gi-Oh! Pack from the last 5 years. This is a video that I would not be surprised if I saw on Ruxin's channel like tomorrow. The AI was getting smarter and smarter the more and more feedback we gave it. It's not perfect, but it went from a decent start to generating borderline perfect video titles. And I really wanted to push this machine to its absolute limit. I wanted to see what it could come up with if I gave it one of its own original ideas back to it. So I gave it this prompt, something completely nonsensical it came up with, and I told it to do this. Create a monologue script for the short, factual YouTube video titled Citadel of Chaos, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that caught on fire. I'm not gonna lie, I had no idea what it would come up with or even where to input this, but with enough tinkering around, I managed to generate this script. I just want you guys to be sure and keep this in mind, the script has not been altered in any way from its original form. So we're just gonna pretend this is a different me in a different video. I had a couple of friends who were playing Magic at the time, and I was interested in learning, but for whatever reason, I didn't. I always thought it would be because the cards were so expensive, but really it was because the cards were so expensive. I played games like Ogre Battle and Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation instead of Magic the Gathering, and overall it was a really enjoyable experience in comparison. I remember going to a couple of card shops in my neighborhood that always sold Magic, but they were always full of people, and I didn't feel like paying money to watch other people play games. And I felt really left out as a whole, so I never really did get into Magic the Gathering, unfortunately. But that meant when Yu-Gi-Oh came out, it was mine to play without any pre-existing social pressure or established communities. There are a lot of flies, oh my god. And since there were no rules or restrictions on how many copies you could buy of each card, it wasn't long before I had a pretty decent collection overall. I remember collecting dozens and dozens of play sets of Mystical Lamp. The first one was called The Deck That Caught on Fire, after a particularly destructive incident involving a careless flip of my lighter while shuffling cards and some loose wick from a candle in my room, which is, of course, completely unrelated. The second one was called The Deck That Caught on Fire 2, The Return of the Deck That Caught on Fire. You know, as you typically do name things, after I lost everything in the fire. There are a lot of flies. I don't remember how I lost everything in the fire. All I know is that overall it was a very, very bad day. And to be fair, it wasn't really my fault. I had a candle burning on my dresser, and when I flipped the cards with my lighter, it didn't occur to me that there might have been an open flame nearby. I don't know if you've ever really been in an ordeal like this, but when you're young and you have your first brush with death, it's overall a pretty big deal and a pretty traumatic experience. This event would really shape my entire Yu-Gi-Oh career in front of me. For weeks afterwards, all I could think about was how every little thing could have been my last little thing. That's a sentence. Every time I saw a candle or a match or anything that could start a fire, I would think about how easy it was for, honestly, everything important to me to just go up and smoke. And overall, it's amazing what you can ultimately learn about yourself once you really do lose everything you own, except for your deck box and some scraps of paper with, a couple doodles on them. And that's all that honestly survived from the fire that night. So anyways, after going through that experience, I swore to myself that I would never allow myself to lose all of my cards again. So we're just gonna put my hat back on after that fucking train wreck of a sentence. Yeah, so this was 100% generated by GPT-3, and although it had a lot of kinks to hammer out, finally managed to generate something reasonably readable. Now, it didn't really help that I couldn't figure out that the API Tom used, and I ended up just shortcutting using a restaurant review API, which was, of course, written by GPT-3, of course, to write this script, but the bones of something are there. Something reasonably interesting could have been made into a video out of that, mess of a script. And there are a lot of ethical dilemmas when it comes to this sort of thing. It's very easy to abuse this text generator in order to generate anything that may need human input. And fortunately, OpenAI has terms of service where this sort of abuse is against their usage policy, but if it didn't exist, think about what could be fabricated, whether it could be employee feedback reviews or shamelessly rewriting and stealing the script of a YouTuber who has 600 times your audience size. Thanks for watching. Be sure to sub.